Indian Wells, March 2026. Alex Eala's practice session drew crowds that matched Alcaraz, that matched Sinner, that matched Venus Williams. BNP Paribas then dropped a single day in the life video featuring her, and it became the most watched YouTube content of the entire 2026 tournament. It wasn't even close. 2 months earlier, the Australian Open assigned her court 6. What happened next? The Filipino army turned Melbourne Park into a hostage situation. 196,000 people watched her pre-tournament press conference alone, burying Djokovic, erasing Alcaraz. Navratilova watched from the broadcast desk and called it a scheduling mistake on live television. Mats Wilander had already delivered his verdict on TNT Sports, comparing Eala's feel, her hands, her shot-making instinct to John McEnroe's peak 1980s wizardry. That comparison is the bombshell. Because McEnroe didn't just dominate courts. He built cults. And what Wilander confirmed is this. Every tournament that buried Eala in small courts, wrong time slots, and forgotten scheduling blocks handed the Filipino army its next recruitment drive. Every time they ignored her, the army got 10 times bigger. James Blake admitted it publicly. The WTA built an entire tournament in Manila just to stop the bleeding. The story doesn't start with a trophy. It doesn't start with a ranking milestone. It starts with a cue. January 2026. Melbourne Park. Alex Eala's first-round Australian Open match was assigned to Court 6. What showed up was something the Australian Open had genuinely never seen before. Hundreds of Filipino fans formed a line that snaked through the grounds, past food stalls, past other match venues, all the way back toward Rod Laver Arena. Many of them never got inside. The court hit capacity early. Those who squeezed in stood packed into every available space. Filipino flags covered every sightline. Chants of Laban Alex, Fight Alex in Tagalog rattled the walls of a venue that was never designed to contain this kind of energy. That day, the Australian Open broke its own single-day attendance record, 101,696 spectators across the grounds. The loudest, most chaotic corner of Melbourne Park? A small outside court, where a 20-year-old from Quezon City was playing her first ever Grand Slam main draw match. Martina Navratilova, watching from the Tennis Channel broadcast desk, did not mince her words. The organizers, she said, needed to keep far more in mind where players are from and what their actual fan base looks like on the ground. Lindsay Davenport was more direct. Eala probably needed to be on a bigger show court. An 18-time Grand Slam champion and a 3-time Grand Slam champion were telling a major tournament, on live television, that it had fundamentally misread the room. This misread had precedent. Go back to March 2025. The Miami Open. Eala entered as a wild card, ranked 141st in the world. Tournament organizers had every statistical reason to treat her as a footnote. Small courts. Standard scheduling. No special treatment. What followed was one of the most disruptive runs in recent WTA history. She eliminated Yelena Ostapenko, then reigning Australian Open champion Madison Keys, then world number 2 Iga Swiatek, all in straight sets, before losing to Jessica Pegula in the semi-final. With each win, the Filipino community in South Florida multiplied visibly inside the grounds. By the time the Swiatek match arrived, the atmosphere had transformed into something Pegula would later describe with genuine surprise. She is really good. A really good tennis player. We are not going to see enough of her. Pegula also noted there were people wrapped around the stadium just trying to get in, which, she said, was pretty crazy. That reaction is the engine of this entire story. Where did all these fans come from? The answer is structural, not spontaneous. Over 10 million Filipinos live outside the Philippines. Approximately 1.7 million of them are based in California alone, which explains exactly why Indian Wells 2026 looked the way it did. A substantial Filipino diaspora across Australia, explains Melbourne. The Filipino diaspora is one of the largest, most geographically distributed communities on Earth. And for decades, it had no figure in global tennis to rally behind. Eala did not create this fan base from nothing. She unlocked a latent army that had been waiting, without even knowing it was waiting, for exactly this moment. And here's the critical point. the one that connects directly to what Wilander said about McEnroe. This army does not behave like a conventional tennis crowd. It behaves like a football crowd that wandered into the wrong sport and refused to leave. Loud during points, vocal on errors, bringing flags, banners, coordinated shirts, and chants into venues that were architecturally and culturally designed for polite applause. At the Australian Open, Eala's opponent Alicia Parks admitted she was rattled. Not by Eala's tennis, by the atmosphere. Parks said it was very difficult, that she had expected it, but also hadn't. She was so focused on the crowd in the first set that it affected her play entirely. Parks won the match, but the crowd had already won the narrative. When Mats Wilander sat down on TNT Sports after that 2025 Miami semifinal run and searched for a comparison, he bypassed Federer, bypassed Navratilova, and landed on McEnroe. He said Eala has hands given by God, that the feel and understanding she brings to the game transcends conventional shot categories. That it is, essentially, what John McEnroe did to tennis in the 1980s. That comparison matters far beyond the technical. McEnroe wasn't just a brilliant tennis player. He was a disruptor, someone who brought confrontational, electric, personality-driven energy into a sport that prized restraint. And in doing so, forced the sport to reckon with something it wasn't ready for. The parallel Wilander drew is uncomfortable for the establishment, precisely because it is accurate. Eala and the movement surrounding her is forcing professional tennis to reckon with something it genuinely was not ready for. The WTA's scheduling apparatus was built around a logic that prioritizes ranking and seeding. First-week match assignments flow from draw position, not from fan demand, not from cultural significance. This system worked efficiently for decades because the fan base for any given player was, broadly speaking, predictable and proportional to their ranking. Eala destroyed that model. A player ranked outside the top 100 should not be selling out practice sessions. A wildcard entry should not be generating atmosphere comparable to a Grand Slam final. The system had no mechanism for processing what was happening. So it defaulted to its existing logic and kept making the same mistake on a loop. Australian Open 2026, Court 6. Fans locked out. Navratilova's public rebuke on Tennis Channel. Dubai 2026. Eala drew packed crowds through her quarterfinal run, with many fans having traveled specifically to watch her play. Indian Wells, the BNP Paribas Open's day in the life. Video became the tournament's most-watched YouTube content of the entire event, by a distance. Tournament executive director Philippe Dor told Front Office Sports directly, "We love every minute of it. We benefit from it. We promote it." That is a tournament director openly acknowledging that Eala's fanbase is a commercial asset, not a logistical inconvenience. The contrast with the Australian Open's Court 6 decision, made just 2 months earlier, is stark. James Blake's pre-Miami 2026 interview was the clearest public admission that the sport had been operating with faulty intelligence. Speaking on Tennis Channel, Blake referenced the 2025 Miami scheduling directly, saying he had learned his lesson. That Coco Gauff needed to be on stadium. That Eala needed to be on stadium. That the international interest in both players is so high, their fan base is so worldwide, that they need center court, because these might feel like home matches for both of them. A tournament director publicly revising his entire operating philosophy because the evidence had become impossible to ignore. Now look at the data trail that was visible the whole time. Eala's pre-tournament press conference at the Australian Open drew 196,000 views, nearly double Djokovic's. More than 6 times Alcaraz's figure on the same day. Aryna Sabalenka, a 2-time Melbourne champion, recorded 9,000 views for her pre-tournament press conference. By the time Indian Wells began, Eala's Instagram was approaching 1 million followers, more than double the followings of players ranked significantly above her, including Pegula, Keys, and Anisimova. These are not vanity metrics. They are demand signals. And they were visible to anyone who chose to look at them. The Australian Open chose not to look. And paid for it with Navratilova's very public verdict. Novak Djokovic, who has more experience than almost anyone alive with what it means to generate polarizing crowd energy, called the situation around Eala's fan base a good problem to have. Andy Roddick said it is the type of story you cheer for because it is simply great for tennis. Coco Gauff, who lost to Eala in the third round at Indian Wells, acknowledged the crowd dynamic with a maturity that impressed observers. After defeating Eala in Dubai, Gauff addressed the crowd directly, thanking Alex for bringing a new demographic into the sport entirely. That is a world number 4, one of the most celebrated young players in the game, crediting a lower-ranked opponent for expanding tennis's audience in a way that she herself had not managed. Tommy Haas, tournament director at Indian Wells, offered perhaps the most revealing institutional response of all. He said having all the Philippine fans coming to support Eala was fantastic, and that you want that new atmosphere in your event. New atmosphere. That is the key phrase. What Haas was acknowledging, without saying it explicitly, is that the Filipino Army represents something the sport has never previously had. A non-traditional tennis nation mobilizing at elite-level volume. Tennis has always had passionate national fan bases. Spain behind Nadal. Serbia behind Djokovic. Switzerland behind Federer. Those nations carried decades of professional success and established infrastructure into their support. The Philippines had none of that. Eala built the fan base in real time, from scratch, while simultaneously building her own career. And the two curves are feeding each other. The WTA's creation of the Philippine Women's Open, announced in November 2025 and held in January 2026, is the most concrete institutional acknowledgement that this movement has permanently altered the sport's geography. It was the first WTA-sanctioned tournament ever held in the Philippines. Tickets for the finals sold out before Eala had even confirmed her participation. Not a tennis story so much as a cultural phenomenon, wearing tennis clothes. Eala has been measured and precise about what she thinks is happening. She told Front Office Sports she did not expect this kind of fan base or crowd rallying behind her. On Andy Roddick's podcast, she described the moment in 2026 when she finally accepted that the scale of support was real, saying that every week they just kept coming and she had to accept it, absorb it, and understand she was in a genuinely good position. She added that she does not know how long it will last, so she is trying to enjoy it while it is happening. The 20-year-old at the center of the most significant fan mobilization in recent WTA history is approaching it with more strategic clarity than most of the tournament directors who have been scrambling to accommodate her. The Wilander-McEnroe comparison was never just about tennis technique. It was about what happens when a player arrives who operates outside the established vocabulary of the sport. Someone whose presence reorganizes the room before they even pick up a racket. McEnroe did that in the 1980s, through personality and genius in equal measure. Eala is doing it through a combination of genuine talent and a nation of over 115 million people that had been waiting for exactly this signal. Each scheduling error, each small court assignment, each overlooked slot, fed the same outcome. The Filipino Army does not shrink when it is ignored. Navratilova delivered the verdict on live television. Blake walked it back in a pre-tournament interview. The data had been visible the entire time. The sport had its warning signs. It chose not to read them. And heading into the European clay season, with the French Open on the horizon, every tournament director on that circuit is staring at their scheduling spreadsheet with a question they did not have last year. Where exactly do we put Eala? And what happens to our ticket sales if we get it wrong? End card. Subscribe for forensic tennis analysis that goes where mainstream coverage refuses.